Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. The preseason in full swing. We still have plenty of NBA news to get into as well. But before we sink our teeth into a number of different topics today, quick reminder, do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit that like button as well. Join almost 30,000 people now subscribing to the NBA Front Office Show YouTube channel. And go follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Keith, you came down with a bit of a cold over the weekend, but only out for a day and back in action already and ready to go. Good to have you back at I would assume close to full health anyway.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good today. It's preseason. We don't push it in the
That's right.
preseason, right? You gotta ease into things. Don't take a minor thing and turn it into a major thing, right? Right. We want to really take it easy. So yeah, it's just one of those things. It's that time of year, right? It's the beginning part to the middle of October, and stuff's going around school, and it all
Mhm.
comes home eventually.
And have you seen the Halloween decorations popping up all over your town? Because
Oh
they're
yeah.
definitely popping up
Yeah.
all over mine. Some really creative ones too, which I'm enjoying this year.
Yeah, what's big down here in like our area is those gigantic skeletons, like those ones that are just
Oh,
like 12, 20 feet tall.
yeah.
I don't know how tall they are, but they're everywhere. And
Sex skeleton.
so it's like either skeletons of that, or there's this dragon skeleton that some people have. I keep telling my wife we should buy the dragon and then never take it apart and just leave it out and just put different decorations on it for every single holiday and leave it out all year round.
Get a big Santa hat to put on it,
Hmm.
put some Easter
Yeah.
bunny ears and
Yep.
things of that nature. Yeah,
You
that'd be
got it.
fun. I like
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
like
And
that.
Uncle Sam had it 4th of
Yeah,
July, and just keep it rolling all year long.
yeah. I like that idea. I like that idea, especially the part where you don't have to assemble and then disassemble the dragon,
Exactly.
where you can just do it once, just assemble it, and then leave it,
Yep.
because
Yeah, because that's the
that's
other
always
thing I've
crazy.
heard from the couple people we know who have the big skeletons. They're like, it sucks to put it together every year and all that, and nobody has anywhere to store something like that, I imagine. So it's yeah, I don't want to take things apart and put it back up. Christmas lights is already enough. I say that's our annual scheduled family fight every year when we put the Christmas lights up.
All right, well, let's get into some NBA
Do
news. I do, yeah. Putting together stuff is not fun. Putting together rosters in the NBA, though. I mean, how do you like that transition? Even more difficult, especially when guys are asking for trades. I guess we got to start here. This is keeps getting weirder and weirder. Kai Jones asking for a trade from the Hornets, or saying publicly on X that he has requested a trade from the Hornets. Something's not right here, Keith. This isn't a typical, like, I'm requesting a trade type of situation. And I hope everything is okay with Kai Jones.
Yeah, it's definitely something not right here. He's been going through quite a bit of stuff where a lot of posts on various social media, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, maybe TikTok, I don't know, but they all pop up eventually somewhere. And in all of them, he's doing increasingly weirder and weirder stuff. I know he was dropped by his agency,
Mm-hmm.
Clutch. They don't maintain him as a client anymore. That's been wiped. There's a bunch of different places you can find who players are associated with by agency, and that's been updated all across the board now. Just weird stuff. And then, did you see the interaction with Terrence Ross?
I did. I
Yeah,
did. Terrence Ross, wasn't he call himself the greatest of all time?
yeah. Terrence Ross said, "Is this guy okay?" or something like
Yeah.
that. And he replied back and said, "I am. I'm the greatest of all time." And Terrence Ross's reply was, "So no."
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know what to make, of all of this. It's one thing to have confidence in yourself as a player. Everybody should. It's one thing to have a big ego. A lot of guys do. That's part of how they get to this level. But the trashing his teammates stuff, and now the
Yeah.
Hornets are saying he's away from the team and all these things. I just hope whatever is going on gets resolved before it goes to a place where nobody wants to see this head for Kai Jones, and get it figured out, because that's what we all want to see eventually at some point. But yeah, scary, weird stuff out of him.
Yeah. hopefully everything turns out okay with this situation. Figure out the basketball stuff later, but it seems like there's some other stuff going on there that needs to be sorted out.
Do you think the NBA even bothers to fine him for the trade request, or you think they're just like, we can ignore this one and just
Yeah,
let it
I
go?
don't. I think given the context, if this was just out of the blue, just a trade, just he threw that out there on social
Sure.
media, then yes. But given the context, I think the NBA is just going to say, take care of yourself, take care of
Yeah.
whatever is going on. And I'm sure there's people who have a better idea of exactly what's happening. But I would
Yeah.
imagine that's not going to do anybody any good. There's bigger things going on here, I think. Anyway, that's my perspective, that there's bigger things going on here than basketball. We'll see
Yeah.
whenever the truth does come out.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, yeah, get the help you need, man, and get things back on track.
All right, let's chat a little bit about the Chicago Bulls. They're a team that is in that proverbial treadmill situation where a lot of Bulls fans have been wanting them to sell off pieces, tear it down, and rebuild. The Bulls have steadfastly refused to do that for years now. They thought they were going to make a push when they traded for Nikola Vucevic. Didn't work out. They didn't make the playoffs that year that they traded for him. At one point, they looked like they were going to be this really fun team in the Eastern Conference, but then since Lonzo Ball's injury, it just hasn't been able to come together for them. So there have been lots of talks about what could they decide to move on from Zach LaVine? Is that part of a teardown? And is that the piece that can really get them some assets to jumpstart a rebuild? But apparently their asking price for Zach LaVine, despite the history of injuries, despite the big contract that he's got, where not every team is going to value him on that contract, they are asking for a lot for him. I always say, though, what's a lot depends on where it's coming from, right? The Bulls would probably say, we're not asking a lot for him. Other teams would say they are. But regardless, right now, that's the word that's out there, that they are maintaining a high asking price on Zach LaVine. And that would suggest that they're probably not super motivated to make a move at this moment. We'll have to see before the trade deadline comes up, though, in February.
Yeah, Zach LaVine just entering year 2 of his 5-year contract that he signed with the Bulls. Not this past summer, but the year before that. 40.06 million this year, so roughly 40 million this year, 43 million, 40 almost 46 million, and then 48.9 million in the last year. That last year is a player option, so 178 million and change over the next 4 years. 15% trade bonus on top of that. The cap is going up enough that he would get a chunk of that as he goes. After this year, he might even get the whole deal with that. Might be it'd be close to getting there, but he would get a large chunk of that bonus. So yeah, it's a big contract for him who wants to trade for it. For his part, Zach LaVine basically said, look, the Bulls showed me they wanted me and I want to be here. And this is, what I want to do. And then, he kind of said trade rumors are part of it. I'm a grown man and I've been traded before. So it is what it is. So I think it's very, very interesting to, when the player is very honest about these things of like, hey, if it happens, it happens, but I'm happy where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and he seems like he's got a pretty mature approach to this, to trade rumors. Not everybody's going to have that same approach, but I do think at some point the Bulls are going to have to make a tough decision. We've got another story here about them that maybe they're saying, no, we don't, because let's just get into it. DeMar DeRozan entering extension talks with the Chicago Bulls. Should they really do this? I mean, I know Lonzo said he's coming back, but I don't see a path. I don't see a path for them to even be a big threat in the East. I don't see a path for them to be a team, to be that proverbial team nobody wants to see in round one. I just don't see that with this group. So what are we doing? Why sign up for more of this if that's the case?
Now you sound like every single Bulls fan I've talked to since the start of the offseason.
Right?
Really started with the Nikola Vucevic extension, where it was like, all right, and nobody, no one came out outside of the crazy people would say crazy things. No rational fans came out and said, what a terrible extension for Vucevic. It
No.
was just like, why are we doing this? Everybody was like, yeah, somebody wants to pay him 20 million, fine, but it didn't have to be us. And then it was then that was followed up by, hey, let's give Kobe White $33 million over the next 3 seasons, which is, again, nobody seems upset about the contract, but it's like, why did we do it? And now you're in a spot where, they doesn't sound like they're going to trade Levine. Maybe they're going to extend DeRozan. It just does start to get to like, what is your upside here? 6th seed, maybe 5th seed? Like with this group, like I can't see them being a home court advantage team. There's just too many teams in front of them that they'd have to climb for me to get there. And you lock into those guys, you're also probably not going to be bad enough to get a good draft pick. So now you're just kind of sitting in the middle and fighting around the play-in tournament and the back end of the lottery where the chances of jumping up are fairly low. So yeah, I don't fully understand this one and why the Bulls would want to do this, but this has kind of been their MO. They don't like to bottom out and tank. If it happens, it happens, but they intend every year to be a competitive team, and it's almost been to their detriment at times.
Well, I do think that if they're going to take Vucevic and at the trade deadline, they're going to flip him. Okay. Or next summer, you're going to that's if you're going to trade eventually your plan is as long as the contract has, and I think that's fine value on Vucevic contract. So as long as it's not a negative value contract, I'd rather have the contract, trade it for future assets if it's draft picks or whatever, than just see you later, walk away. We're not going to extend you. We'll take the cap space. Give me the stuff, right? That can come from a trade. It can be a gamble because what if the player gets hurt or something like that? But if they're talking about extending DeMar DeRozan, you're probably committing to, if you're going to give him an extension now, you're probably committing to the last useful years of DeMar DeRozan's basketball career, right? He is going to expire.
What's 34 years old.
Yes.
This summer turned 34. So, just to put that out there, and he's in, what is this? This is season 15 for DeMar DeRozan. So that's, yes, I would fully agree with you, even if he has maintained being a very productive and good player, where at some point that is going to fall off.
Right. So my point is this, like Vucevic, I get, right? Even though I don't want to see this Bulls team stuck in mediocrity. Vucevic, I get. He's still young enough. You can say it's a good gamble that you could flip him and you can get assets. Kobe White, of course, and he could even be part of the next iteration of the Bulls, whatever that looks like. Yeah, DeMar DeRozan, though, you're committing to holding the bag. Like the Lakers extend LeBron. Let's say that happens. Well, that's okay. Yeah, they're not going to trade him anyway. They're going to hold the bag. Whenever he's done as a basketball player, he's going to be on their roster. They're not going to flip him for more assets or something like that. And that's okay for certain teams, for certain players. But for the Bulls situation, you want to move on from these guys while you can get something. Don't be the team that the player's value just completely expires on. And that's what's going to happen if you extend DeMar DeRozan, because nobody's given up a lot for a 34-year-old DeMar as it is. You keep him around for another year, another 2 years, which, by the way, Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, they do an extension right now, assuming it's a big enough raise for DeMar, which maybe it won't be. He won't even be trade eligible till next summer. They won't even be able to move him at the trade deadline.
It'd be, well, definitely not at the trade deadline. It would be next summer for sure if they give him a big enough and long enough extension, for sure. Yeah, it would really lock them into this group for the rest of the season. And that's why I guess I kind of, DeMar DeRozan extension eligible. He's in the last year of his contract. So they could extend him all the way up through June 30th. We've seen that, right? This past year, Vucevic with the Bulls was in that situation and reached an extension before free agency actually opened. I know it comes out, the reporting comes out a little weird because free agency now opens at 6 p.m. Eastern on the 30th. But these were for Vucevic, Harrison Barnes, and Naz Reid. Those guys all did extend before free agency actually opened. So we are getting reports of new deals, and it can be a little hard to kind of parse through. And for the average fan, they don't really care. It's just Vooch got 3 new years and $60 million, and that's fine. But with DeRozan, you can still carry it all the way out to June 30th. So I don't know why I would necessarily really be rushing into doing an extension unless you think he's going to ask for a trade if an extension doesn't get done here. And is he going to be like in the middle of December when the trade market kind of opens up? Is he going to be like, yeah, I don't want to be here? then you kind of deal with that situation as you deal with it. But I don't think that's where it's headed. So I would not rush into an extension here, but I don't think that's going to be how it plays out. I think if they can get to a number they feel good about and the amount of years they feel good about, they're probably going to do this. And that would be the other thing I'd be very careful of if I was the Bulls. I would keep this to a 1 or a maybe 2 year extension, just given his age, because then you start to run into a whole bunch of problems where it is, all right, what are we doing with this contract? Because it just gets super messy if you lock in on a guy that old. And if you do a big enough extension, then it gets even worse, right? If you start pushing up over 30 million or near 40 million, that gets really, really complicated and messy. So I would want to, stick to a shorter term extension, not as much money, and just see where it kind of goes. And I'm not sure DeMar DeRozan goes for that. So it'll probably end up in a deal that I quite frankly won't love if they do extend.
Why not just go the other way? Like why not? Look at what's happening right now in the Eastern Conference. There's an arms race.
Yeah.
Look at what Drew Holiday returned for the Blazers, right? Look at how does Miami feel right now? How does New York feel right now? How does Cleveland feel right now? All these teams that just saw what the Bucks and Celtics did. You put DeMar DeRozan out there. Now's probably not a bad time to be it. And again, I don't mean right now. Right now, you probably wait until middle of December, but this probably isn't a bad time to be a seller on the market.
Sure.
If I'm the Bulls, that's what I'd be exploring rather than an extension.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is I would have done this 4 months ago when the offseason
absolutely
was, leaning into getting started. I would have been all about it then, and they didn't. Now it just gets a little bit harder because who are you trading him to? That's not to say nobody would jump, and the contract's not so big. You're talking one of these $40 or $50 million contracts you're trying to move. It's $28.6 million, so it's definitely a movable number. But yeah, I think we're going to see this play out a little bit. But yeah, I'm with you. I would have blown this thing up, at the start of the offseason, said, all right, hey, we got to work around Lonzo's contract for now. If he makes it back, great. So be it, we'll work. But for now, that's just kind of sitting over there is money we got to work around. And we're starting over. We're going to go super young. We're going to bottom this out, recoup some of the assets we gave up in other trades, and just try to start over. And, but they didn't. That's not where they chose to go. So here we are with, this team that's going to be okay. They're not going to be terrible, but I'm not picking them to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I believe they were the team that I had dropping out as well. All right. Enough about the Bulls and that proverbial treadmill. The James Harden saga continues. We don't know if he's going to play at all with the 76ers. He did report to camp, but the Clippers reportedly believe that they are the only team interested in James Harden, and as such, they're not going to increase their offer to the 76ers. In fact, they are holding firm. Terrence Mann is the guy that they will not add into the deal that the Sixers would like in, but they have, I know there are reports out there that they've done a lot of things to try to aggressively, move different, get a third team involved, get extra draft capital, things of that nature to try to make something work, but they don't feel like they need to add value to their offer. So we're kind of at a stalemate here between Philly and the Clippers. For Philly, it's a question of, are we better off taking on these guys that the Clippers don't want and having them on our roster, and for whatever assets we can get? Or are we better off just hoping that somehow we can convince James Harden to step onto the basketball court for us and play this season, because that's going to be maybe even the Fat Thor version of James Harden may even be better than what the Clippers would be sending to the 76ers at this stage. That may be the case. I don't know.
I love it. I've been I don't know if you watched Loki or not, but
I have not gotten into Loki. Just I have family in town right now, but as soon as they're on their way out, I will be checking that out.
I mean, we all know I'm a fan of all of it, but I was very happy with the first episode. I'm just happy to be back in that world and enjoying it. But yeah, I mean, I get it from the Clippers side, right? If you truly believe, hey, we're the only ones bidding, why would we give up more? I did see a handful of people say, though, hey, sometimes if you are the only ones bidding, though, it is the right thing to do is to increase your offer a little bit just to get it done.
Hmm.
I personally, and I like Terrence Mann, I would not let that be the holdup for me if I was the Clippers. I would understand if it's like, hey, we're not giving you Terrence Mann and two unprotected first round picks. I can understand that side of it, but if it's like, hey, if you want Terrence Mann and an unprotected first, and then we'll get to the rest of the matching salary through expiring contracts,
Yeah.
I'd be done. Get this deal finished and go, because I just don't see necessarily outside of injuries, which is obviously a very big concern for the Clippers, how you have a real role for Terrence Mann on a team rather that has James Harden on it. Like you're starting to have too much duplication on your roster with a lot of these high usage wing players. So I'm not really sure where you go with that. So that would not be the holdup for me. And maybe that's ultimately where this gets done. Maybe the Clippers are kind of saying, hey, let's talk in a couple weeks into the season. Let's
Yeah.
see what it looks like. And maybe their hope is James Harden does show up and act like a jerk when the regular season starts and shows no effort and really bombs out for Philly. And it becomes a huge problem. And then they kind of go from there. So I think there's some gamesmanship happening here for sure. This is all starting to play out a little bit through the media as well. So that sometimes can signal that deals getting close. So we'll see. But all accounts are right now from Philly, he's showing up, putting in the work and doing
Hmm.
his thing and looks good physically, looks like he's in great condition. So I don't know, but I'll believe it when I see it, when they open up and he's out there giving 100% effort and playing really hard. Then I'll believe he's locked in, until the trade comes. Up until that point, but let's wait and see.
I'm looking at Philly's schedule here. If the Clippers gamble is that Philly is going to struggle in the early going and that James Harden's going to be a problem and the record is going to impel them to make a move, they may not be wrong. There are some very winnable games here. I mean, there's Portland, they've got Toronto twice, they've got Washington, they've got Detroit, they've got Indiana. Oh, the joy of being an Eastern Conference team. But they also have Milwaukee, they also have Phoenix, they've got Boston twice. Like, if they're not close in any of those four games, which are against, fellow contending teams, the 76ers want to be in that sphere, the Clippers may not be wrong, and that the 76ers may decide right then, hey, we need to do something here and get past this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that could be a thing, right? Where that becomes a whole thing as well. So I think there's a lot at play here, and a lot of it is really, I hate to beat this dead horse, but a lot of it is really going to be when we get there, we'll know, right? It's going
Yeah.
to have to play out for a little bit, and then eventually we'll see, how it all comes together.
Keith, we've got a dog cameo
We
episode.
do. That's
Yeah.
Carly. She's hanging out here in the background. They're mad because they would like to have. I'm not going to say the word, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a certain time of the early evening, and they would like to have that, and they're angry that they're not having.
We will we'll get through. We'll do some rapid fire here so that the dogs can get their.
No. We don't need to rapid fire because they need to wait. They need to learn how to tell time better. That's really what it comes down to.
What mine do is they start pushing it earlier and earlier every
Yes.
day. Like, they start acting
Yep.
like it's time earlier and earlier to
Yep.
trying to see if they can get you to give. Tell you what, it's a power struggle. It's a power
It
struggle,
is.
that's for sure.
Yep. And nothing's worse than the time change, which is coming up here
Oh
in a few
God,
weeks, and that's
it's
just
so
brutal.
bad.
Yeah.
Dogs and kids,
Yes.
it's not good for either of
Nope.
them.
Not at
good.
all.
Not
Yep.
good. I spent time living in Arizona. Gosh, that was nice. No time zones. No time
That's
zones.
where I'm actually going to be when the time changes. It did not great planning on my part. At least, hopefully, it'll all go off smoothly. My flight home is at 6 a.m. from Phoenix to Orlando on the day the time changes. So
Ooh,
hopefully,
that
I
gets tricky.
can seamlessly figure that out. I am sure I will be up like every 2 hours, checking to see what time it is, and
Wait, what time is
somehow
the flight? Really? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Is my phone flipped with the time change and all that other stuff? Yeah, I'm going out there. I'll shout it out here in case any of our listeners and viewers are interested. Arizona State University is putting on a mock trade deadline, run by their School of Law and their sports law program, and they're putting that on. You could just Google Arizona State University mock trade deadline competition, and a bunch of folks are going out there. I'm going to go out there to help assist and be one of the folks who helps judge the mock trade deadline and all that. And I'm super excited about it. So it'll be a lot of fun going out there. That is at the very beginning of November in about 3 weeks. So if anybody's interested, check that out and look it up, because I know they're still signing people up. They've only got a handful of spots left.
All right, that's going to be a lot of fun. And I shouldn't say no time zones. They have a time zone in Arizona.
Yes.
The time doesn't change. They don't have the daylight savings time switch, all that kind of stuff going on. So
whichever year, it feels like we
nice.
hear that's going to be everywhere, right? And there's all this legislation to get rid of it, and then every year it never goes anywhere.
There's a great chart out there somewhere. And I know I need to get to Jared Allen, but there's a great chart out there that shows, like, graphically how different it would be if you just kept things on daylight savings time. If you didn't, and shows like what time it would, when sunrise would be, when sunset would be.
It's usually related to like school bus pickup times and stuff like that. Yeah. I've seen
that. And so I think there's real arguments to be made either way, but I can also say this: look, I'm old enough at this point. Like, this has been a topic of conversation for decades.
Yep.
It's just not happening. It's like Puerto Rico becoming a state. Like, it's just. It's been talked about forever, and look, I'll believe it when it happens. When I see it happen, then I'll believe it. Until then, I don't. When I see
James Harden show up at Phillies games and play hard, I'll believe they're getting rid of daylight savings time.
There you go. There you go. A little bit of injury news. Jared Allen out for the Cavs, dealing with an ankle issue. Hopefully, this is not anything that's going to bother him long term, but something worth noting: the starting center for the Cavs, and the Cavs are, again, one of those teams in the East that I think is one tier below the heavy hitters with Milwaukee and Boston. So the Cavs, they're going to need their guys out there if they're going to find any way to keep pace. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on. Jared Allen, tremendous player. I still think they stole him in that trade where they picked him up, that 3-team deal. They were able to get him away from the Brooklyn Nets, and I still don't know why Houston didn't just take him.
All things considered, and I realize there's a lot of draft pick stuff to be played out with that trade yet. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it right now, the Cavs made out easily the best in that trade, right? Because Harden's not in Brooklyn anymore. That whole thing fell apart. Who else was there? Houston was in there. Indiana was in there. I think they did well. The Cavs did in that trade. This came out over the weekend, and it came out with the kind of always a little ominous, will be reevaluated in 2 weeks, which is not will return to basketball activities or practice in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Always the reevaluated is a little rough. And when we're only 2 weeks from the season starting, that's a little bit of they already might not be ready to go at the beginning of the year. So I'm really only saying that for this kind of standard disclaimer now. Any injuries that come up now with much more than we'll be back in 5 to 7 days, it's probably going to be worth monitoring if they'll be ready to go at the start of the year, because we're recording this on the 10th, and 2 weeks from today is the start of the regular season with the tip-off night, and then the season really starts in full the next day. So we're down to it for any of these 2 to 4 week injuries. Probably mean these guys are going to be out to start the year.
Well, and one of the things to certainly keep an ey on here too, I always take a look at, what does their schedule look like? If somebody's going to be out here, what are they going to miss? The Cavs have back-to-back games. It is their 4th and 5th game of the season on Halloween and on November 1st, back-to-back against the Knicks.
Yep.
Look, it's insanely early, but in terms of like tiebreakers even, but playoff seeding, certainly, this is one of the teams that they are expected to be in competition with. If Jared Allen is not back by that point, that could be a difference maker. Particularly, you're getting the next 2 games against them. If the Cavs are not at 100% and you wind up going 0-2 because they don't have Jared Allen in there, that could create some problems with the seeding later on in the season. Again, don't overreact to it. It's still very early in the season, but we always got to keep an eye on things like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That is the whole thing, right? Is where it becomes, a big thing of the, these tiebreakers are so huge. And this is where I'm all for the NBA doing all the stuff they've done to reduce travel, but this is where some of these mini series can go kind of sideways. Because if you catch a team on the right or wrong time, depending on
Yeah.
which point of view you're coming at it from. You might get completely misleading results. It may not be what you're expecting it to be down the line, and it could have major swings, as you said, especially when it's a team you're going to be in direct competition for seeding wise. Yeah, that starts to become a big thing. So good call out by you. Let's hope he's back by then and ready to go. But we'll update you when we see more.
All right, Keith, the Celtics come to an agreement with Peyton Pritchard on an extension. It was not a massive. I'll let you get into the details of the extension itself, but I thought you put out a really good point where you just said, look, and by the way, he responded by going berserk in a preseason game.
Yeah.
Clearly, he was celebrating, but if he winds up being just a rotation level guard, this deal is going to look really good for Boston in terms of bang for your buck.
Yeah, 30 million over 4 years, all fully guaranteed. So one way or another, we don't know the exact structure yet on this, but one way or another, that's $7.5 million a year. That is roughly the room exception. So Peyton Pritchard could have said, and it used to be, guys did not sign contracts this low very often. They used to basically say, nah, if it's going to be less than the non-taxpayer mid-level, I'll hold out, because the belief was if I have a good enough year, that will be there for me. I think some guys are starting to realize less and less teams are having access to the full non-taxpayer because they're bumping up against the aprons and the second apron. So that's a whole thing. I think other guys are realizing teams don't necessarily want to hard cap themselves by using large chunks of the non-taxpayer. So that's another thing with this. And then it starts to turn into, all right, well, the taxpayer MLE in Pritchard's case, that's lessened. That's now basically equivalent of what the room MLE used to be. So now it turns into, all right, well, am I going to count on a cap space team giving me cap space or giving me part of the room? All right, I'm going to be here. I'm going to play a big role on a pretty good team where he wasn't happy last year. He openly said that, and he talked about it, how, hey, I wanted to trade because I wanted to play. Like, that was it. Like, I just wanted a chance to play, and he was buried in a deep guard group. He's going to get that chance to play this year, and the Celtics are very high on him. So I think this is a spot where, yeah, let's get this done. And $7.5 million, unless he completely falls apart and can't play at all, it's hard for that to turn into anything but a good solid value for the Celtics.
Yeah, I mean, look, you lose Malcolm Brogdon, you lose Marcus Smart. Maybe the benefit is you're able to get Peyton Pritchard on this deal. Like, if they had the same team they had last year, is he signing this extension?
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably not,
because the minutes probably aren't there.
Yeah. I think what would be hard for him is, am I ever then going to get my spot? Right.
Yeah.
Like, hit him clearly. Then you have the flip side of, well, hey, if I'm getting this much, I may not play enough to get more than that. So that could factor in as well. So that could be a thing. But yeah, I don't know. I tend to think no, because I think he would have said, hey, if there's not going to be minutes for me, I want to go somewhere where I can play. And I think clearly now, and it's funny because, a lot of people, where like he's never going to be a solid enough player to, warrant this kind of contract because he's not big enough and blah, blah, blah. We're talking about a backup point guard. Like, you don't need to be huge to be a backup point guard that plays 25 minutes a night in the regular season and then probably 10 minutes a night in the playoffs. Like, that, he's fine. He can definitely fill that role. And on the nights when they feel like they can't play him, guess what? He probably won't play very much. They'll run with Holiday and Derek White at the position and call it good. So, but I think, for what he brings as a shooter, he's a developing playmaker. We've seen him run a lot more pick and roll in these preseason games than we had seen previous, which is, good for him because he needs to. And, it's hard to get mad at anything that, averages $7.5 million.
Exactly. And look, worst case scenario, and you hear us talk about this with veteran minimums all the time. Worst case scenario, if everything goes awry, this is a very easy contract to move.
Yeah,
it's a very easy contract to move.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Which is not what we're expecting. I'm just saying, that's your your floor essentially. You've got a very movable contract.
On that too, I think you're going to see more teams try to get guys to sign these. Teams like Boston, Phoenix, Milwaukee, maybe the Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, teams that are up around the super tax line, because then they're not bleeding talent, right? And that's, you got to be careful that you don't bleed too much talent out the door because you let too many guys go. If you can get some of these guys locked up, because then if nothing else, it's a trade chip you could throw into a trade to get something down the line to say, hey, we need a center that makes, $6 million a year. Great, here we go. Will you take Peyton Pritchard $7.5 million? Maybe what you're really paying for is with a draft pick, but I think you're going to see some of those super tax teams do that because they're just not going to want to be in a spot where they get caught with all max guys and all minimum guys, because that makes it very hard to build out your roster.
Keith, do you know off the top of your head what's the super tax number projected to come in at for next season? What's that line going to be?
It is almost 191. So
Okay.
remember, they're pricing in a very small cap jump next year, only about 4.5%, instead of the full 10%. A lot of people think it'll be the full 10%, but if it comes in at the NBA's estimated 4.5, it'll be cap of 142, floor of 127.8, luxury tax 172.6, tax apron 179.9, super tax second apron 190.8.
So that tax apron would also act as the hard cap for a team that uses the mid-level exception, the biannual exception, accepts a player via sign and trade, those sorts of things. So, okay,
well,
just good to know.
The first apron gets triggered by all the regular things, the non-taxpayer, the biannual sign and trade. The second apron gets triggered if you use the taxpayer MLE. Because remember, you don't get it if you're over the tax apron. So in real world right now, the Nuggets have triggered the hard cap at the second apron because they use their taxpayer MLE to sign Reggie Jackson. So they're sitting right now, I can tell you, they are about 4.7 million under that second apron, at which they're hard capped. So that's, just something to keep in mind. And we'll talk obviously a lot more about all of this as we get closer to the trade deadline and trade rumors and all that stuff on what teams can and can't do and all that.
Right. All right. Last thing we've got for today, Devin Vassell. Keith, I know you were excited about his contract structure. What did the Spurs do? They got a little tricky here, huh?
Yeah, I'm going to nerd out for a minute here. And the folks who come to this for the cap and roster stuff are probably going to love this. So we knew we got the report 146 million over 5 years. Shortly thereafter it came out it's 135 million with 11 million in bonuses. Not uncommon that happens. My guess is how this went down is the Spurs and Devin Vassell agreed to the 135 fully guaranteed number. Then they said, all right, let's throw some bonuses on top. San Antonio has done a lot of bonus work in their more recent deals they did with Keldon Johnson and his extension. They did it with Trey Jones and his new contract this summer. It's just something they like to do. But then my guess is the Spurs said, hey, can we structure this in a way that's kind of advantageous to us? And the Vassell and his agents were probably like, sure, go ahead. As long as the money's the same, we don't really care. Right. So what he did was he gets $29.3 million this first year of this extension. So that'll be next season, 24-25. The next year that drops down to $27 million. The year after that drops down to $27 million, or stays at that $27 million flat. Year 4 of this 5-year extension drops down to $24.6 million. Then in year 5, it goes back up to $27 million. Well, in year 4, you might be saying, well, why would they do that?
Yeah.
Why would they bring it down? That year, that's the year Victor Wembanyama hits free agency. So in year 4, if everything goes the way I think we all think it will, they're probably going to be maxing out Victor Wembanyama. And that would leave them with Devin Vassell at the lowest number they could give him at 24.6 in the agreed upon structure. And then Victor Wembanyama's cap hold, which would likely probably stick because it'd be under his extension amount unless he's insistent on getting it done. Those would be the only things on the Spurs books would be Vassell and Wembanyama's, extension, assuming he extends. So that would give them, by that point, you're talking, let's say Wembanyama, let's say it all goes great and he qualifies for the 30% max. You're talking about $90.3 million for the two of them, 91 million maybe, against a cap that's going to be about 189 million projects to right now. She's talking about 100 million in cap space potentially. So I think what San Antonio did was said, hey, it doesn't change the overall money we're giving you. Let's push this as far as we can push it out, bring the number down in that year. That gives us the most possible flexibility to add around you and Victor Wembanyama, and let's go forward with that. Clearly, they'll have had some other guys extend. They'll have re-signed some other guys and stuff like that in the years preceding. So they're not going to have 100 million in cap space, but they increase their flexibility. Then you might ask, why would it go up in that final year? I think the reasoning behind that in that final year is at that point, we've already got Wembanyama. We've already built out the roster. We're probably not really going to be a cap space player in that final year. So we're going to bring his number back up. So then if we want to extend off that number,
Yes,
the salary's a little bit higher. It's not at that, 24.6. It's up at the 27 million. And maybe that's enough of a difference to get him to sign the veteran extension versus pushing it into free agency. Everybody knows I love a declining contract, right? I think they're great. The problem is when you sign a younger player to them or a pre-prime player, sometimes you get stuck. The number's not big enough to extend the player off of. And then you end up in a spot where they go into free agency, and that could potentially end up in a spot where you lose the player. So even with the 140% veteran extension rules, you got to be careful with that. So I think Spurs very creative in the way they structured this. I think really, really good stuff by them.
Yeah, that was a great breakdown of why they did this the way they did, because this makes a ton of sense, and I think this is very smart the way that they made this all work out and had the foresight too to not just have it decline but have it jump back up so that you can potentially get that extension done with him. That could wind up being massive. Now it also creates the expectation though that extension offer will be there, and the Spurs can cross if things don't go according to plan with Devin Vassell. Maybe there's a little bit of an awkward situation, but you cross that bridge when you get to it. You've given yourself the ability to give him the extension, or depending, if he becomes a full-blown superstar, obviously maybe that changes, but
sure.
But you've got the ability now to most likely be able to extend him at that point. So the future Spurs may be looking back and thanking today's front office for doing what they did.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is if he does become a full-blown superstar, I'm not saying he will, but if he does, then you run into the designated player rules anyway, and you can blow way past the 140% veteran extension. So you end up in a spot where you can really kind of do whatever it is you need to do if he hits that point anyway. So Spurs are well covered here for a lot of different angles. It's really only if he's like, he's kind of an all-star once in a while, so he wants to get paid like an all-star level guy, then maybe the 140 is not enough off of the 27 million. That starts to become, all right, where are we really going with that? Mm-hmm. What's that going to be, like 40 million? So maybe that's not what he wants to do, but I think you're probably going to be within range of getting something done. And who knows 6 years from now what any of this looks like, but it's really smart work and proactive thinking by a front office, because I think what happens a lot is if you get stuck in that's so far down the line thinking, you don't plan for this stuff, and then the next thing you know, it's on top of us. Like I remember thinking, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum won't be facing these next contracts forever, and then here we are, right? It's just how fast it moves in the NBA.
Yeah, life comes at you pretty fast. It's just the way that it goes in the NBA, the way it goes in life in general. But yeah, before you know it, you're dealing with that situation, and if you've thought it out ahead of time and you're prepared for it, it makes it that much easier to navigate. So good job by the Spurs on this one. Keith, I think that's about it for today. Obviously, we've got preseason basketball going on. Chet versus Wemby was a lot of fun. I hope we get a lot more of that this season. But it's great to have NBA basketball back on the floor. And before we know it, like you said, things come up quick. Before we know it, we're going to have regular season games that are actually counting in the standings. Can't wait. We are heading towards it, as we are also heading towards 30,000 subscribers over on the YouTube channel. Make sure you help us get there. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Till next time. See ya, and stay safe.